Hi, this is Teri from Watercolor 101 at What's Your Art Palette. In this episode, I'm going to speak about paper and brushes. These are highlights from the class sessions that we've been having. It's a 6-week class session for beginners. So, moving right on to paper. There is student grade and professional grade papers. Typically, the difference is in student grade that they are machine made and maybe a little less tooth. And when I say tooth, that's the texture of the paper. In cold press, which is what I recommend, cold press no lighter than 140, that's the best to work with in learning. I recommend Arches, Kilimanjaro, which is from Cheap Joe's. There are a few other brands. And it's an experiment. You'll find that you have some favorites and some not so favorites. And it is a trial and error. There's cold press, there's hot press, and in cold press there's also rough, meaning more tooth. I find that rather exciting because in dry brushing, a little less water, more pigment, it gives you more texture, more options for creating texture in grass, rocks, water. But the typical paper, and one that I work with most often, is cold press 140. But it is a treat to get into a 300 pound or something in the 200 pound. It's quite a treat for me personally, but that'll be your own decision once you find your own voice. And then in hot press, that is has very little tooth, very flat. And some people like that because it also has a little less absorbency. And in less absorbency, there's a little more room for correction if you need to lift a color or change something, because there are those options. Yes, there are options in correcting in watercolor. Some people think, oh, I can't do that. I can only do acrylic or oil because I can correct myself. There's many ways and tricks of the trade to do some correction in watercolor as well. Of course, there are limitations too. So moving on to paper, back to paper, I should say. They're student grade, professional, typically student slash academic, is machine made, a little less investment in the manufacturer's efforts to create the paper. I think you should start with the better right away. Start with a good quality paper because you're just learning, and if you're going to judge your abilities or inabilities based on how the paper is behaving, accepting pigment, it might be a bummer. Anyway, so start with good paper. Arches is a wonderful brand. There's Kilimanjaro, which is a brand that comes from Cheap Joe's, an online art source. Many online art sources. There's Jerry's Artorama, there's Cheap Joe's, Daniel Smith, on and on and on. There's a store and online in Milwaukee called Utrec, Urechttrec. Oh, you can get close, Google it. Anyway, they're bought from Dick Blick purchased them, so they might go under Utrec or Dick Blick. You'll find them, again, Milwaukee has 2 stores, either ends of the cities. I'm not sure about other cities, but a great online, as well as you can find coupons online that you can use. Sometimes you can use them in the store, but most likely online. And if you get together some artist friends, it works out kind of cool because you can join an order together and maybe get a higher coupon, free shipping, that kind of thing. So stay in touch with what's going on online. Paints, that's later episode, don't go there. Back paper comes in different tablet forms. This one has a spiral. It is a student grade. Strathmore is student grade. It is 140 cold press, and I haven't been disappointed in this particular paper. Now, it is an older tablet, so I'm not sure if if things have changed a little bit, but I've been kind of happy with this one. Anyway, so it's loose other than the spiral top. Works out okay unless you work wet on wet. Then you're going to need to staple or tape your paper down, and look up another YouTube for that. This is a tablet, cheap. Found it, bargain store, thought, oh heck, I'll play with it. Well, it was a disappointment. 1 or 2 sheets were great. I shouldn't be holding up the brand name, right? One of the, or two sheets that were great. And then when I hit it with water on another, water and pigment, it just stuck. It didn't want to move. So it told me the stabilization in the paper was inconsistent. So it'll find its purpose. Sometimes I take my unsuccessful paintings, or ones that I feel are unsuccessful, and I'll cut them up into business cards or bookmarks or greeting cards. I'll take my favorite little spot of a painting. So it'll have its purpose somewhere along the line. Folding it up, make a card out of it or something. Then there is another tablet form, which is probably the most preferred and the best brand name arches of paper that I know of. Again, Kilimanjaro is pretty darn good, but Arches' reputation of high consistency. And don't be surprised by the price of it. It is a pricey paper, but it's very good. Comes from France. Michaels carries it, Hobby Lobby carries it, and they have coupons. So there you go. You can pick up a tablet, different sizes. I'd say don't get a real small size in the tablet. I mean, you can get a little one that's almost like postcard size. Working small, surprisingly enough, is difficult. It's tough, and it requires practice. So get a good sized tablet. I mean, if I wanted to, I could work with half the sheet. But anyway, they come on a tablet. This is another form of tablet where they're adhered on all four sides. Some have clear glue, Arches has black. And it leaves a little opening right here that you can very carefully slide a blade. And if your paper is wet, like just painted and you want to remove it, be extra careful. Paper, it has a very high content, if not 100% cotton rag. So it being a fabric, the paper is in a vulnerable state if it's very wet. So be very careful, or move to a different tablet if you're finished working with this and you're wanting to get a fresh start. Let this one dry, put it aside or so. Arches did come out with a tablet that's similar to this in construction, where it's a loose leaf, basically three sides are loose, and a tablet binding up top. I got a feeling it's machine made. I wasn't real thrilled with it, but if you want to get a student grade, I'd say get the Arches in this tablet form. It's not, again, you're going to get the consistency of Arches, which is a good thing. Then there's loose sheets. This one's already been divided up. Again, it's just as it is. This is a 200. Lots of tooth, both sides. It's another way that manufacturers, if it's machine made, can cut on cost if it's not textured on both sides. One side has more tooth than the other, and some people prefer that. It's kind of gives them that medium. Again, I like working with tooth, so I always typically pick the side that's got more texture. You'll note here a deckled edge. That's what that's called, deckled. And when you start tearing your paper, you're getting a straight edge, or if you cut it, I should say. That's why we want to tear. And a way to tear sheet paper, which if you want to get really nice sheet of paper, but you want it many sheets from it, that's a way of cutting cost. You fold back and forth till it's nicely scored. Again, if it's to the size that you want to paint. Keep scoring it back and forth, and then I get my water, clean water. You run clean water down, so you're getting into the cotton, the fiber of the paper. And then it's best if you have a straight edge of a desk or something that you can kind of tug it and tear it down the side. I don't, and I've done this a few months of time, so I'm going to risk it and do it right here in front of you. It's careful tearing. And the wetter you get the paper, you're going to get closer to that deckled edge. And sometimes the framer can give you a nice deckled edge too. They have machinery. Why do you want a deckled edge? In the event that you don't want to put the paper behind matte, you don't have to cover up the edges. They've painted right to the sides, and it's just dynamic painting. It adds to the visual and the value that you floated within the frame. Let's see if I can So it would float and kind of be offset. You'd get that neat deckled edge look. So that's another option. This is 260 cold press. You can really feel the difference. Go in the store and handle some of the papers. Well, some of them are closed up in packaging, but try it. See, go to the loose leaf. Don't do it if you have dirty hands, though. Just handle the corner. Somebody may want to buy that, and your body oils would create difficulty for whomever does purchase that. Now we're going to talk about brushes. In the class, I asked everybody to get a 1-inch flat regular paintbrush, 1 inch. I said 12 or 14 round, and most everybody played with a few of the size 14, which is the bigger, and felt uncomfortable with it. So if you're buying new brushes, 12 is good if you have brushes. And then a number 8 round, and be sure that it's a watercolor brush. You don't want to get mixed media that includes watercolor, because that's still not going to be a good dedicated watercolor brush. And again, what I said earlier, if you're just starting, and if it's kind of an iffy brush, you might judge your own experience and not realizing that the brush is contributing to what you don't like about what you're doing. Picking a watercolor brush, it's essential to look for a brush that has a good point. It comes to a nice point, especially when it's wet. The hairs don't split. When it's wet, it comes to a nice point. This is so vital and gives you so many more options. Also, a nice bounce. When you go like this, it should bounce back. Can you see it kind of give a sassy bounce back? Some watercolor brushes, when you do this, just kind of mush. Again, you're limiting your options on how you can use this brush if it doesn't come back to shape and bounce a little bit. If you're wanting to work vertically, horizontally, if you've got a mushy brush, it's just, you're not going to get your point. You're not going to get the versatility of being able to come to a point. So that's important. Then these kind of brushes, you'll see it has a clean or a clear barrel, and it comes to a bevel on the end. Again, versatility. This barrel is for when your painting is at a certain degree or level of drying, sort of we'll talk about it. Anyway, you could scratch into your paper, causing the paint to do some really interesting line work, wonderful for making grass and texture, as well as the lines and leaves. It's called scratching when you do that. So it's disturbing the integrity of the paper just a little bit, but it's intentional, and it's intentionally placed when you're scratching. So it's a nice little versatile thing to have at least one in your bag. If you don't, that's fine. Cut a plastic, I don't want to say credit card, because then there's numbers there, but like a store card, the swipe type things, you can cut those up and also use those for scraping. And then I have a sharp palette knife that serves me well for thinner lines and doing scraping or scratching, as well as the palette knife helps release off the tablets. When I go into this area, it's such a fine blade, it helps me release the paper from the tablets. So 140 cold press, go for professional grade or a higher student grade. Brushes, 1 inch flat. If you've already got brushes and you got a 3/4 inch flat, that's fine. Just don't go any larger than 1 inch if you can help it. 12 inch round and an 8 inch round, good point. Sassy little bounce back. If your brush splits when it's wet, get a new one. Put that one in your craft basket or whatever. Be sure they're watercolor brushes. And that's about it for this session. Thanks. Session 2 coming up. Thank you.